Hi, I'm Gordy Gundaker. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor podcast.
Hi, I'm Don Martin. Welcome to the Dirt Parlor. And this thing is big.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's episode of the Dirt Parlor. Joined from a remote location, my great co-host, Mr. Don Martin. So, Don, thanks for meeting me here. I'm in Disney right now on a little vacation trip with my family and stuff. So everything from we're just doing it all remote. But we want to start off by thanking our great sponsors. Of course, we want to thank Steve Martin with Ace Duran and Nutrient Ag. We want to thank Jeff Hoker with Hoker Trucking, Bodies by Skinny, an official Longhorn dealer, Reed Millard with Millard Family Chapels, Bo Popejoy with Hot Rod Septic, and Maria with FK Rod Ends. And also my company, Checker Custom Screen Printing and Embroidery. I almost snipped myself there. So we want to get right into tonight's show. We got an awesome guy who I got the pleasure to know at Charlotte this past year, Dave Warren. So Dave, thanks for joining us. I'm going to give you a little more hit here. Dave is a huge sponsor of Boom Briggs, Tim and McCready. He sponsored the Outlaws and Lucas Series with Dave Warren Power Sports. So Dave, thanks for coming on the show tonight, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So I want to ask first right out. You've got your name on a lot of stuff, a lot of great people. How did you get into sponsoring the series and the race teams and things like that? Because I know you do more than just what we see, in the late model world, every day.
Yeah. So it's kind of a crazy story how all that came about. So, I had a really good relationship with Steve, Boom's brother. And so Steve come out to the power sports store and bought a side-by-side, and him and I were talking a little bit. And at that point in time, Lucas was sending deals to their platinum drivers saying, hey, if any of your sponsors want to sponsor the series, we'd be interested. And Steve thought that it would be a really good fit because we were just opening the power sports store. And so trying to go back all the way. So we kind of felt that it fit the demographic, from everything that we sold and that type of stuff. So we thought it was a good opportunity to do that. So then, I shared this story the other day. This is what really brought me close to Steve and Boom. So literally 2 days before I was supposed to send the check to Lucas, my office manager comes in and tells me that she had made a huge accounting error, that she wasn't allocating half of our employees' portion of their sales tax. So it was like a $75,000 mistake. And as a business owner, Gordy, you understand cash is everything, right? So I literally text, Wayne from Lucas and Steve and said, hey, listen, I just can't do this right now. At this point in time, it just doesn't make sense for me, and I'm going to have to pull out. So Steve calls me the next morning, and this just gives you an idea of what the Briggs family is all about. So, nobody's ever done anything like this for me in my life. And what happened was, Steve said, hey, what happened? What's going on? I heard you're backing out, da, 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 da. And I saw, I wasn't, I was transparent with him, told exactly what happened. And he's like, let me call you back in about 10 minutes. So he calls me back. He says, hey, Boom and I had a conversation, and Boom and I are going to write the check for you because we don't want to see you back out of this thing. We think it's going to be good for you. And we know that you'll pay us back whenever, you have the opportunity to pay us back. And he had shared a story with me that, when his dad first started, Briggs Transport, they had a couple trucks go down with motor problems. And there was a guy in Erie that basically replaced the motors for him, told him same thing. Hey, listen, I know you don't have the money right now. I know your family's good for it. When you can pay us, you'll pay us. And so basically Steve said, if it wasn't for that guy, Briggs Transport might not be where it's at today. So we want to pay it forward. And there we go. So I became family at that point, I feel like. And, and then the opportunity, came about with, with Timmy coming on board. And then obviously, one of your guys' podcasts, you talked about it, especially Don was focusing in on that point where, you're kind of where you're at depending on points. And then, Tim decided to go with World of Outlaws. So then that relationship started there with Steve, built that relationship, become really close with Brian. So it's kind of just crazy that, here we are 3 or 4 years into this, and this is where we're at.
The big thing I noticed right off the bat last year, and I was thinking of you, was the fact that here it is, you're getting ready to get all invested in Lucas, and your boy jumped ship.
Yeah.
And I was thinking right off the bat, I go, well, this is a great start for a new guy to go in. He's going to be having vehicles at these races, and he's not even going to have his main guy in the audience.
Hey,
And
if there's one thing you know about Timmy and Boom, you never know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So,
well, you do know one thing: if you get them down the lake, you can guarantee there's going to be a couple of pictures on the table.
yeah.
Because I've been a part of those shows. And what's best about those part of those shows, if you do get Boom and Timmy together, and you actually are lucky enough to get Robbie Allen there as well, and Greg Satterley, I can tell you all bets are off.
Yeah.
No, Dave, really, it's really cool to see. I'm not surprised what Boom did for you.
Yep.
Boom is probably one of the best character people he's just a great guy. He's done a lot for me. He sponsored us when we did Timmy with the Chili Bowl. He helped out. That's wonderful that you have that relationship.
Yeah, it was funny because Boom and I had never really talked up until that point. And then, as our relationship grew, we laugh about it today, like how many people that we knew and never can't believe that our paths had never crossed, up until this point. And my way of paying back, obviously, was paying back the money, but, I took over, when we got, Timmy on board, I took over his social media. So I run all of Timmy's social media, Boom social media. And, obviously when you got somebody the caliber of Tim and what Boom does, we've worked on, creating more sponsors. We got a bunch of new sponsors last year, which obviously, as Gordy, and Don, it takes a little bit of pressure off of Steve and Boom always having to write the check, because obviously this sport that we all love is not easy to fund going up and down the road every weekend. So it's really, like I said, it's unbelievable what it's bloomed into, and it's bothering me right now not to be down in Volusia watching, to be honest with you. I went down for the first week, but I was telling Gordy last week, my wife booked us a cruise, and we're heading out next week. So I really didn't think I could be gone 2 weeks in a row and still be married. So.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, heck, look at Gordy. Gordy has a couple of kids. He's got a business, a racing team. He finds a way to still get down there.
Hey, listen, you got to realize my kids and my wife are sitting right behind me. They're right here in the living room. But I did it the smart way. I made sure that they were included on this trip, and then I just got the little repercussions of being able to go an extra couple of days to Disney and hang out. So, I think the best part. And it goes full circle, right? You get yourself surrounded by, like a guy like Boom, and the people, just like you guys know in real life, who you surround yourself with is who you become and what you kind of explain it as yourself. And, when we got to meet, Dave down there in Charlotte, it was honestly, it felt like I had known you for a long time. It didn't feel like we just met each other, it just took right off. And it says a lot about, Boom and Chubb and their entire program and the guys that they are and what they mean to our sport, because, Boom is a glue guy, I guess you'd say, right? And you put him in the middle of the Outlaw Tour and the camaraderie he brings and the energy he brings, he rallies guys around him, whether it's in owners meetings, drivers meetings, whatever it may be. And I think it was cool to see you be a part of that as well, and get to learn more about your story and see how much you've just full on jumped right into being a part of both of those teams and the series and just going all in on racing. It says a lot about, your guys' character and really just being a part of all of that. And I think that's what being a part of racing really is, right? When you're all in on this sport, which, I feel like if you meet any of us, we all are, you realize how quickly it's more of a family than it is just a bunch of guys competing against each other.
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. Obviously when you and I met in Charlotte, it was total by accident. We were sitting at the same table and that's the biggest thing that I've realized being involved as much as I'm involved now in this racing community. And I've told my wife this, it's amazing the relationships that you build, and you never know where they're going to go and what they mean or what's going to happen. And, Don, I honestly saw the podcast a couple weeks ago when Timmy was on, and I didn't know at that point in time that you and Timmy had that kind of relationship. So again, that's
It's
the
scary. It's
awesome
scary.
part. That's the awesome part of what you guys are doing with this podcast is, I first got into racing because my parents absolutely love it. I remember, we have the three local tracks here around home, Erie, State Line, and Raceway 7. And I remember as a kid going every weekend. And then my parents ended up building a new house next to Dan Armbruster, who was a late model driver in our area.
For
And
61, I believe.
yep, that's right. And so Danny was like a second father to me growing up because I think we moved in there when I was probably about 9 or 10. So, I started working on the car. My first job was, cleaning mud off the car after, come in after heat races or whatever, and handing Danny his helmet and his gloves. And then, I started doing tires with his brother Jim, right up until I was, I think, 16 or 17. And then, I joke about this, but that's when I found out what girls were and kind of got away from racing for a little bit. And then, you know, um, it just changed a little bit when you didn't have that person that you knew to root for. Danny raced for obviously a little bit longer after that, but there was a car owner that came in, just wasn't the same as it was when it was us six guys. I remember as a young kid throwing $20 in because we had to buy a new right rear for that night for the feature to try to make things work. And then, now, part of the reason why I did the sponsorship when I did it is, my dad, and I can't believe he's on a cruise right now, missing this week of racing, but every night sitting in his recliner, doesn't matter whether it's High Limits, whether it's World of Outlaws, whether it's Lucas, he is watching it. And, as hard as I work and as many hours as I put in, it means the world to me for him to be able to hear our name, when a caution flag comes out. And so that's a big part of why I do it. And then, like I said, I've never would have guessed, 3 to 4 years later, this is where we would be. This is how much involved we would be. Now helping Boom put on and promoting a race for his dad, doing the memorial race at State Line, which is obviously helping, State Line get a World of Outlaws race back. So, I mean, it's just crazy and how much my hands are involved in it. But, like I tell my wife all the time, she's like, why are you bringing all this on your plate? And I'm like, it's because it's fun. It's something I enjoy. I love. It's not work, so.
I was curious, being in the Kodiak area, did you know Dick McLaughlin at all at the Scotties?
Yes. Yes, I did.
He was like a dad to me.
Yeah.
Gordy knows that. He was very close. I would have not been able to pull off the Chili Bowl with Tim and Hartman without Dick.
Gotcha.
Dick is, naturally he's gone now, but when you think about Raceway 7, you think about Northeastern Ohio, and you can't help but think about what all he did for all the racers in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious, since you've been in there, you got to witness it. And anybody that got to see that man walking around with that half cigar in his mouth.
Yep.
I mean, we were the people that were blessed to get to know him. We are blessed. He's probably looking down at us right now, Dave, and having a little chuckle right now. He loved racing. God, he loved racing.
Yeah, Raceway 7 was one of my favorite racetracks to go to because, you could run the bottom, you could run the top there. There was such good banking there. I mean, it's not the same as what it used to be, but I do fulfill, however you want to call it. There's everything happens for a reason type thing in there, but I told Timmy this once we really got to know each other, and this wasn't blowing smoke up Tim's rear end, but Tim was my dad's favorite driver for as long as I could remember. And then to be there that night that Tim won, on the anniversary of his dad passing, and not knowing that and having to be at Raceway 7, it's just so crazy how all of this stuff, just comes back.
Yeah.
And he's all heart.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the special things about a guy like Timmy, right? And you being on board with him is, Timmy obviously is, when we had him on our show, we explained it, but he's one of those guys that wears his heart on his sleeve. He's an emotional guy. You can see it in how he prepares. His emotion. When he's getting in the race car, is he's all business. When he wins, his emotion is through the roof, is as far as you can get. Um, but if you ever get the chance to talk to him about his family and all these things, he's emotional in a completely different way about that. And he was a great mentor for me growing up because I got to see that, right? I got to see how you carry yourself as a professional when it comes to being to races, when it comes to being a family guy and putting things, your priorities in a right way. And those type of relationships, like you're explaining, you don't get those without being inside of our community and learning, who these guys really are. And it's easy to sit back and watch it on Dirt Vision or watch on Flow and make your predictions about who that guy is,
Right.
just based off of how he races a car or whatever. And when you meet these guys up close and personal, you learn that they're probably almost the exact opposite of how they drive, right? I think my favorite one of all time, if you look at it, is if you ever didn't know Shannon Babb and you watched him race 10 years ago, you'd be like, dude, this guy's got to be the most out of control person in the pit area. Like he's just a nut job. And then you meet him and he's soft spoken and he likes to spend all of his hours in the woods and he's the greatest family man you've ever met. And so I think that's what's beautiful about our sport. I guess at the end of the day, you'd look at it and say is you kind of you get to have these up close and personal, things with these guys. You can go in the pit area and meet these guys and you learn about them. And I think that's why our sport is growing so much and at a rapid rate because, we're not NASCAR. We don't have all these, you got to buy a hot pass and you don't get access to your guys. Maybe you could take one picture and that's it. And you don't see them. This is way more in depth than what most people realize. And I think more people that come in and newer guys like yourself that sponsor a series or even new fans that come in and grasp this just one time and get to meet a driver, they become lifers. And I think that's what drives all of us so much to continue doing this because we just love it so much. And it's so easy to be passionate about it because in a non-weird way, I guess you say you fall in love with these guys, right? You become passionate for what they do because you see how much they love the sport. And I mean, like Don, I mean, is one of my favorite things is doing this podcast with Don because he spent his life in racing, right, and writing about it and knowing all of these guys. And but I've never met a better stat guy than Don that knows everything. You can't throw anything at him. He's like Stump the Schwab. Can't do it. Just can't fucking do it. And but and like I said,
Thank you, Corey.
it's what's special about it. It's why I love it so much, and it's cool to see. It's cool to see you're passionate about it, Dave, because you're fully invested into it now, right? And I'm sure your family watches it, and your girls watch it, and all these things, right? And you don't realize until you're in it how amazing this sport really is.
Well, part of it helps. So there's two things I want to touch on there. One quick story about Tim. So, the first time I met Timmy, we all four of us went out to dinner and, joking, having drinks, laughing, a good time. So then I think I went to Volusia and like barely spoke a word to me when I'm in the pits. And I'm like, this is not the same guy that I met. Like what is going on? So then, the second night goes by and it's the same thing. And then it finally dawned on me like, hey, this is where he makes his living. This is how he feeds his family. Like he is all business. And that's a whole new level of respect that I had for Tim. Like, hey, listen, I got a job to do. I'm here to work, and this is how I do it. And then to touch on, the family part, like late models are huge, obviously where we're at. I know, where Timmy's from, big block modifieds rule, but like in our neck of the woods, it's late models. And, I have a good group of friends. There's probably 6 or 7 of us, three that are really that, camping, going to different racetracks, spending the night, being there for, full weekend shows, going to Eldor for the, crown jewels and things like that. And, the thing that's funny is like it's now turned into camping events, with the wives. So now they come, and it's just crazy. You're right, how much this has grown. And the part that I love the most is, with the streaming and all that stuff, I am now, through all my years of marketing and doing stuff in the automobile business, I'm trying to come up with different ways to, bring some of my manufacturers and stuff like, listen, guys, you need to see this. Like, this is your clientele. and that's where I know you guys touched on it, or Timmy touched on it in the podcast about getting that exact number of views, because that's where I want to help the Brian Carters, the Schwalleys go to these different, I hate to say it this way, but different companies that have no idea how good this sport is, how fast it's growing, how, the biggest thing I touch on is how the people in this sport support the people that support the sport. And, um, so that's kind of what I've been working on, behind the scenes now. And I feel myself more and more involved in doing that and trying to bring, like, we've got Kawasaki on board this year, with the World of Outlaws, donating 8 vehicles for them between the sprint car series and the late model series. So, again, it's little baby steps. It's hitting singles, getting them involved, letting them see, not trying to hit the 4-run home run every time. So that's the part that I'm really passionate about now, because, my biggest fear, and I think you guys touched on this in one of the podcasts, is, what do we do when the Lance Landers, the Briggs Transport, the other guys that are car owners that, if they're not around anymore, who's going to be there to fund these guys to do what we all love to watch every weekend? Roger Sellers has become a really good friend of mine, and just, you can't ask for a better guy. I mean, he took care of my parents when they were out at Lucas Oil Speedway. And, it's guys like him that, if they're not around, who's funding these deals for these guys to go up and down the road. So I want to see the sport grow. So therefore, owners can make the money, promoters can make the money, and then obviously at the end of the day, all the drivers can continue to race for more money, even more than what they are today.
One thing I wanted to touch on real quick, and Lordy, you'll enjoy this one too, is when you mentioned how Timmy's different at the racetrack. Amy Swindell has got one of the best stories of all time, because the Bondio cars were always pitted right across from Sammy's cars at the Chili Bowl. And Amy would come up to me and she says, I don't know what's going on with Tim. I'm telling you, you're going to need to get him to the hospital or something, because I've watched him throw up 3 times in a trash can. I said, that's not a problem. She goes, what do you mean that's not a problem? Is he sick? Has he got food poisoning? I says, no. I go, that's Tim being Tim. I go, this event gets the most out of him, and his nerves are so jacked up. I go, this happens every year when we're here. I go, in about 15 minutes, he's going to be just fine. And she's just looking at me like I'm half crazy. Like, you're supposed to be one of his best friends. What are you doing? You need to be taking care of this guy. I go, he's fine. And I remember he ran second that night to Clausen in the feature. And we came back. She even hugged me. She was like, I can't believe, Don, I've never seen anything. Sammy, all the years, never, ever puked. But Timmy, the one thing that Timmy has that I've always said, and we talked about Gordy and I talked about on the show, because Timmy's really good. He focuses so much and he's so dedicated to what he does. And he's so afraid of failure that he will make himself sick sometimes. And I think that's what kind of, like, he's so afraid of letting people down. And that's what I love about him, though. Some of the things Jimmy and I get into arguments and I hate about him are some of the things that just come right back to why I love him so much. He's pure.
Yeah.
That's the best way to say it. He's pure.
100%. 100%. Dave, I want to ask you something, because
Sure.
I feel like something that is maybe not talked about much would be looking at the sponsorship side of racing, right? And I feel like there's a lot of businesses out there that maybe have that little bit of extra cash flow, or maybe they are trying to find somewhere to put marketing money. When you dive into looking at, hey, how should I market this? I've got $5,000 extra and I want to look at a team or a series. What is the ways that you kind of look at it and go, damn, this actually makes sense for my money? These things, because I think as racers, there's a lot of racers who don't know how to go get sponsorship. It's really hard. I think a lot of us have a hard time just going, hey, how do you ask a guy for money, right? How do you walk up and say, I really need $10,000, but you don't want to just ask that. And maybe you could have a good way of approaching that too. But, what are things that you look at and go, man, this makes really good sense? Why, if you got $5,000, here's how you should do it. What are some of the things you go through when looking at the sponsorship side?
Well, that's a great question. The big thing for me is, how many eyeballs and how many names can you, or how many times can your name get mentioned or people are going to realize it? Obviously, being a car dealer, people always come to you, whether it's Little League, those types of things. So obviously you have to set a certain budget because obviously it's, every golf outing, every event, somebody's looking for that. So I think, when it comes to advertising, I think a big part of it comes down to where you think you get your best return on investment. And, sponsoring racing's been easier for me because I'm passionate about the sport, so I know what I'm getting myself involved in. The other thing is you got to be patient. You're not just going to spend $5,000 and be on the front of Gordy's car and now all of a sudden I'm going to sell, four side by sides off of it. It takes time. No different than if you're doing a radio advertisement, if you're doing TV or even, internet today, like, it has to be a consistent message and it has to be out there for a period of time. But I think, for drivers today, and it is funny now that, and this is how I know it's working. You wouldn't believe how much my inbox gets blown up now from different series wanting to know if I want to sponsor different drivers, all different types of things, which that tells me that it's working and it's getting out there because other people are looking. But I think today, what I think a lot of the younger drivers are doing a really good job with it is you've never had the outlets to market the way you do today with social media. Like I can tell you, like if Timmy's dad had social media when he was driving, it would be unbelievable the followers that he has because it's unbelievable the comments, the messages that I get, I mean when, you know, to your point, Don, how emotional Tim is, like, I started to see this coming back from the social media page like how much people loved his dad. So, and then obviously I knew how much Tim's dad meant to him. So that's why, we kind of came up with the idea to do a throwback car for the world. And, I tried to keep it from Tim, but obviously it's impossible to keep anything from him. But, the whole part of it, because obviously I didn't know how he was going to react to that, because obviously that could go the other way, right? But, and when we unveiled that car, and obviously I teased it and did all this stuff on social media, but again, it's unbelievable. Like we took Timmy's page from, I mean, it was literally nothing when we had dinner that night and I created it, and now he's at 24,000 followers, and that's within a year and a half time, maybe, yeah, not even, probably not even probably just a full year at this point. But I remember when we did that video, when he announced the number that he was going to run it after his dad. I think it sits at 1 million views right now. So my point with that is what I would give advice to any driver today is build your social media following, you know, do stuff that, engages people and keeps them, that's the beauty of social media. People will tell you up front whether they like it or not if they're not viewing it. But then that's the data that you can take back to these sponsors and say, hey, listen, when I post a video, I get 80,000 views and that type of stuff. So, I guess that's the best advice that I would give to drivers today. And then the same thing, I think that's what a lot of businesses look at, like, hey, where am I going to get the best return for my investment? And it doesn't hurt that when you have somebody that's passionate about, the sport that you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things, that is tough, right? I mean, we know it from a promoting standpoint at Tri-City, going out and racing and doing all these things that I've done. Uh, as I said before, it's very hard to go out there and figure out how to ask somebody for money and do it in the way that's not like, hey, I just really need this 10,000, and I'm going to burn through it or whatever. And I think I heard a really good one. I want to say it was Brian Brown a couple of years ago that talked about it and said that when he gets sponsor money, he actually lists out what he spends that sponsor money on. So say a guy gives him $20,000, he'll say, hey, look, I spent $5,000 buying rear ends. I spent another 5,000 buying wheels. And that was a really kind of eye-opening thing because not so much, not that they own that, not that the sponsor owns that, they, given that money, but I think it's cool for a guy to go, hey, here, this is really what you're buying. This is the parts we are using on our race car that you gave us. And I've kind of utilized that, I feel, and sometimes, you end up maybe calling a guy and going, hey, I really need a rear end, or I broke a rack last weekend and I could use one. Could you sponsor it? And think a guy, that maybe understands hard times or whatever it may be. It's like, hey, fuck yeah, let's do that. I'd love to help you make sure you got one in the trailer or got one that goes on the race car. And I know it's, like I said, it is very hard. Sponsorship is probably the toughest thing in racing. Outside of guys that fall into a great ownership role, like you said earlier with Roger Sellers. I've got to know Roger over the last year, and man, what a unbelievable guy. But not just from a standpoint of unbelievable because he just spends money in the sport. We're promoting a race this year at our place that's a American Big Rig race, and I knew he had one, and I texted Devin, and I had never talked to Roger a day in my life, and we spent an hour on the phone the first day I called him, and he was unbelievable. And I've seen him. Actually, I saw him at Charlotte, and while we were at Charlotte, he said, "Listen, whatever you need, if you want any help doing this stuff," he said, I want to say it was his daughter that runs a lot of it, and he said she's all over TikTok and these things, and he said if you need help, just reach out. We'd love to help. And it's a tough road, right? And we're spending a lot of money a year, right? Whether you're regional racing, whether you're running a tour, nothing is cheap anymore, right? And trying to get a return for these guys in any way you can is what the idea is, right? And I do think there's some people that ruin that for us. I think there's some people that just take the money and they burn it and send it on down the road, and next thing you know, they burn the next bridge and whatever else. And but I would say for any racers living, listening out there, building that relationship that's not just business to business, that becomes more of a personal level is the key, right? I mean, I'm thankful for all the people that have sponsored me. Jeff Hoker is truly one of my best friends now. And I don't even know if I've ever told the story on here, but I went to Hoker at Chad Simonson's wedding. Chad, who helps Chris Simpson, and I was like, Hoker, what the fuck do I have to do to get you to sponsor me? I've been asking for like 2 years, and we were drinking, and he says, "Well, I'll give you $1,000. How about that? We'll start there." And I was like, "Awesome!" It could have been $1, and I'd have been happy.
Sure.
That was 6 years ago now, 5 years ago, I believe it was, and I could pick up the phone at 3 a.m. and call Jeff Hoker, and he would answer now. He called me while we were literally the day after we delivered our most recent baby. He called me just to check in and make sure everything was great with us and the baby was doing good. And that is the stuff that you need to do, right? Because, listen, I will push all of my sponsors as much as I can. Am I going to get them all the greatest return? I don't know. Hopefully I do, but I'm going to help in every way. But building those relationships is what makes those sponsorships last. Not just taking their money, burning the bridge, and calling them back in the next December and going, "Hey,
Right.
can you do 10 more?" Like that, that part's tough. And I love hearing your side of it because you think of it a lot differently than what racers would think of it, right? And you're a numbers guy. Hell, we can see it on your computer behind you. You're just over here just working away. It's late at night and you're clipping away. But I think that's where our sport is trending to, right? Like you have to build your social media. You have to do these things, even if you're a talent, right? And getting the right people in place to help you. And I think that's what is great now with the streaming, with all of these things. We're handed a spotlight that we never thought we really probably could have ever got. And we need to take full advantage of it from, everybody from owners to drivers to sponsors to series, all of it. And I think that's what's good about our sport. We're healthy in certain ways. I think there's ways we can be better, but I think that we're trending the right direction at least.
Well, we bring up relationships, and it's funny that you brought up that story with Roger because I did the exact same thing. So literally, Boom has said, "Here you go, everything's in your lap when it comes to because he doesn't obviously want to deal with it, which is fine. Boom is great at what he's doing, and
Boom's got cigarettes to smoke. He ain't got time.
But my point with it is so obviously Timmy's having success, won 6 features last year. So, we got some new sponsors, but, obviously the way my brain works is you got to strike while the iron's hot, and so, I reached out to Roger, same thing. I said, "Hey, Roger," I said, "would like to pick your brain on something. If you don't want to share it with me, I completely understand, but, this acquiring sponsorships now is kind of falling in my lap. Do you have like a blueprint? Like, is a door panel worth this? What's the front of the car worth? What's the back panel worth? Da 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 da." And Roger said this to me, I'll never forget it. And it goes back to exactly what you're talking about, Gordy, is David, I take what I can get. I take the singles, the doubles, the triples, and the home runs anytime I can get it. And he says, I'll tell you this, most of the sponsorships that I've had have come from relationships. And it's not just, I think sometimes, to your point, as drivers, okay, hey, you go and see Dave Warren, you get a sponsorship, but then you don't go see him again until after that. Like, that's where you have to reach out once a month, reach out, and where that really opened my eyes, to be honest with you, is with Steve Francis. Steve calls me probably every 2 weeks, make sure everything's good, that I don't need anything, that everything, I'm happy. And again, that makes you as a sponsor feel warm and fuzzy because, again, hey, you just didn't take my money and run. You actually care about, feedback, whatever it may be. So, that's another thing that I would tell drivers, like, hey, don't just take the money and run, send a text, update, hey, we struggled last night, we sucked tonight, hey, we won, whatever it may be. So then that way they know, that they're keep being kept up to date and and mentioning, as you build that social media platform, share their pages, announce them, thank them. Obviously, I know Timmy's, boom bust Tim's chops a little bit about, thanking all the sponsors in Victory Lane, but like, an idea that I had. So we obviously had the die-cast car of Tim's throwback to his dad, and I said, boom, I said we should buy a throwback, a die-cast car, have Timmy sign it, you guys create a letter and send it out to all the sponsors. And Steve and Boom are like, that's a phenomenal idea. And I'm telling you, the feedback I got back from all the sponsors were blown away over something as simple as a gesture like that. And to a point, like one of the guys was almost in tears. We gave it to him in Charlotte, and he was just blown away. But again, that's how much these guys get invested. And I think it's little things like that that go a long way that I think sometimes guys forget about doing. Because again, most of them got a full-time job, got a family they need to support, and then they're trying to get a race car ready every weekend.
Sure. No, Dave, it's funny. You mentioned something that there's a lot of similarities like with our podcast. We look at where we were, we started with Steve Martin and Nutrien. He believed in us and to Gordy and I, and he came on through. And then of course, Jeff Hoker comes on board. And now, it's starting to build and build, and we're seeing, people ask me, Timmy and I had a talk about this actually about his, like, did you ever think, he goes, I knew when you and Gordy did this show that it was going to blow up. I mean, I just knew it. He goes, and I think what makes it is because you believe in the same things that we believe in. We love this sport. Mm-hmm. We love dirt racing. And we're going to do everything that we can to promote it and to do the best of our abilities to do it the right way. Now, there are going to be some issues at the racetrack where guys get into each other, and that's why I got Gordy for it, by the way. But,
stirring the shit.
You got to have that, a little bit. And, but at the same time, I look at what we're doing. We're getting to do something pretty cool here. And a perfect example is having you on the show tonight is pretty badass.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And, because without our show, we would never get to meet you like this. And the other thing is the public is going to know who Mr. Dave Warren is. And that's what we're doing here.
We got to hear your fucking name every week, so we might as well know who you're facing.
Yeah, you can be the official power sports of the dirt, the official power sports of the dirt course.
Hey, listen, there you go. I pictured you. Oh shit! I pictured you a million different times as a different way because I kept hearing James Essex going the other Dave Warren Power Sports, and I'll be completely honest. I really would have swore if being, like I said, dead honest, I would have thought you were about a 72-year-old man with white slick back hair. I was like, that's got to be this guy. He's got to be some old. He's just got all this. And then we meet, and I'm like, nope, I was completely fucking wrong, and I did everything I said you shouldn't do in racing, and read a book, and now here I am. So, it goes so many ways, and I want to share a quick story going back off of what you just said about the diecast cars. So, back when the PRI show was as massive, at its peak, I would say, before COVID and all of that, when I was really getting racing, 2016, I ran the Summer Nationals that year, and I will gladly say it. A lot of the stuff that happened for me when I was trying to get racing was through my dad. My dad had made lifelong relationships and friendships with these guys that he was partners with for 20 plus years. The Schoenfelds, guys at AFCO, guys at Hoosier, just numerous amounts, right? And dad's, we had gone to the PRI show, but I hadn't really been racing. But that first year, we had a lot of people on the car, and week before we're going to go to PRI, dad says, "Hey, I need you in the kitchen." And I'm like, all right. And he's got a stack of pictures of our race car, probably 40 of them. And he says, "You're going to take each one of these, you're going to sign each one of them personally to, our sponsors, whoever it may be, Irish at the time, CJ Rayburn is whose cars I was driving, all these things." He said, "I want you to write something." He said, "I want you to think about what you're writing. Write it to them, sign it, write a note to them, all of those things." And, I think at the time I was like 20, I guess I'd been 23 fresh out of college. I was like, this is so fucking stupid. Like, what am I doing? And we went and got nice picture frames, all these things. I carried 2 big ass totes of picture frames to the PRI show. And I was so mad. I was like, this is so dumb. Like, why am I doing this? We went and stopped at every booth, went through our pictures, Randy LaJoy, the Joy Seating, Hooker Harness. I mean, all of these guys that, all these things. And I realized after the first stop why we were doing what we were doing.
The bag got lighter? The bag got lighter?
Yeah, well, that for sure. But the first stop was Beeve at Winners Rear Ends. He's no longer there now, but my dad and Beeve went back forever. So I stop and walk up there and hand him a picture. And I just said, "Hey, I thank you for everything you guys do for us and all that." He took my picture. He walked to the center of their booth, back the old Winners booth used to have rear ends together. That was their deal. But in the center, it had a big deal. He took my picture and he set this thing center stage where every vendor that walked up looked right at it. And I knew instantly. I understood. I was like, this makes so much sense. And I think we continue to do that all the way through COVID. I got a great flashback right before CJ Rayburn died. We went to CJ's shop, and my picture was hanging inside his house. Now, the guys that have ever been to Rayburn's house knows that there's not pictures of race cars inside CJ Rayburn's house. There's a World 100 trophy that sits in the corner and all these other things. But my picture hung in CJ's house. I don't know if it's still there, but I know it was in there. And I walked in, and my dad tapped me, pointed over at the thing, and I thought, damn, all these years later, right? And, those things go such a long way with your sponsors and those people, because it not that they're not appreciated, but those things are what make them feel appreciated, right? That's that personalization of understanding that, listen, they're giving you their hard-earned money at the end of the day. That money that they worked for, that they built up, and whatever business they do, whether it's because they make $5 million a year or they make $500,000 a year, they are willing to give you some kind of, whether it's a 50% discount on parts, they're willing to give you that. And making them feel like they're appreciated in whatever way they're helping you goes so much further than anybody can understand. And you learn that because, listen, there's going to be a time that any racer is going to be down in the shit, and they're not going to have a bunch of people standing behind them. But if you built those relationships, somebody's going to poke their head out and stick their hand out and go, "Hey, I'm here. What do you need?" And I think that's what's what people, I think a lot of drivers need to learn. I think we actually talked about this the other night. We were at Volusia Saturday night, ran into ran into a guy and we talked about the same thing about how little loyalty is used in sport these days. Loyalty used to be everything. You couldn't build a relationship unless you had one for 5 years. And now you got, and it's a part of our game. We got guys switching chassis and shock manufacturers and all these things. But I'll tell you what, if you look at the guys who are 40 plus in our sport, one thing you do not see is them flying all over the place with different sponsors every week and all these things. You might see a different name, quarter panel or something. Those big sponsors that are on the door and the top side of the quarter panel, they're the same. And
Right.
it's because of relationships and it's because of brand loyalty and those things. And I hope our sport gets back to some of that. I hope we get out of this, some of that money craze where it's just like, oh, I can spend 15,000 over here. This guy said he'll give me $10,000 less or, off of parts, but you can only give me 8. So I'm going with this 10. Those relationships that are built, that means something, especially if a guy's been with you for 5, 6, 7 years, maybe he can't give you $100,000 a year. Maybe he can only give you 50. Maybe he can only give you 10 instead of 20, but that guy's going to give you 10 no matter what every year and never going to balk out on you. So it's a crazy deal, I think, but hearing that, and I think a lot of guys need to realize that personalization of building those sponsor and that sponsor work is what drives our sport at the end of the day. And I think that's what's it's great at times, but it can be very damning at the same point.
Well, I think a lesson that my parents taught me early on. So my parents owned 2 bowling centers growing up, and the lesson that was instilled in my mind or my brain was, the same people that you step on going up the ladder are the same people that are going to be there when you come down. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, they lose that, where that guy, like you said, Gordy, can be there for 10 grand for the next 10 years. Well, that's, a lot of money over the next 10 years or whatever it may be. So, I think that's a huge part. And, Don, getting back to what you said, like, the biggest part I love about this podcast and somebody that is still, you know, really invested in the sport, every week when I watch you guys, I'm learning something new. Like, I remember the first podcast that really stood out to me was when you had Rigsby on and you guys were talking about the streaming. And Gordy, you started going down, the rabbit hole with, your parents being track promoters and understanding what they go through. Like, I just don't think a lot of people understand all the sides of it, and I think you guys are opening that up and bringing people on board that can share that side of the story and get further educated. And obviously education is everything when it comes to, to life. And, after watching that podcast and hearing about the streaming thing, and, one thing Michael said that really stuck out was, what are these guys getting from merchandise sales that they never got before because of where streaming's at today? And it never hit me until that was said. And, and obviously I know that's a very touchy subject when it comes to our sport, streaming, where the money goes, because I've always been a big believer that if you don't have the promoters and you don't have the tracks, where are these guys racing at? So, and if you don't have the stars there, then who's watching? So, I mean, it all goes hand in hand in hand. And I think, for me, that's why I want, and Tim hit it, a couple weeks ago on the podcast, like if we could bring some more of those corporate sponsors in that could get a taste to see, of what this sport is and what it's growing to. And, obviously, in my opinion, the sky's the limit because of all the doors that are starting to get opened up. But, I think you guys are a key part of that because your traditional race fan knows going to the weekends at his local track and, um, you know, watching there, but then obviously watching the streaming side of things. And, that's why it was so important for me to bring a race back to our area, with one of the tours, because I just know how much this area is craving for it. And, another cool thing that we're talking about doing is having like a Daytona watch party, but we're going to do it for the Dream, where we're going to take State Line Speedway. We're going to bring big TVs in, have camping, have it be a 4-day event, do all kinds of things. And Bill Catania, the owner, was gracious. We're going to take the 50-50 money and donate it to, the Drivers for the Cure Foundation that we created for Boom's brother. And, so
Wonderful.
it's different things like that, and again, it's thinking outside the box. It's doing different things like that that's going to continue to promote the sport. Like where I got the idea from was like, how many times are you watching, a football game and they show a watch party at a local bar or whatever it may be? How cool would that, I don't know if Flo would do that, but, show how many people we have in the stands and, because not everybody can make the trip to Eldora. So just different ideas like that I think can continue to grow the sport and get more eyeballs. Because, um, Bill said something to me as a track promoter, and Gordy, you could probably touch on this with your parents. I just want to get somebody to the racetrack one time because if I put on a good enough product, they'll be hooked for life. And so his biggest thing is how do I keep, I'm going to take care of the people that are like, he's done stuff from like free admission night, obviously, trying to get people to come that have never been there before. Because again, obviously we've touched on it. Everything's more expensive, right? I mean, just to go to a movies anymore is, $100 bill. Just going out to dinner with your wife is $100 bill. So, what different things can you do to take the family to, Gordy, I don't even want to know what you spent tonight going to Disney.
Hey, no. Well, I shouldn't say it, but luckily for me, I got Big Don here. So Big Don likes to do that. But even so, just buying a few things. Hell, we bought fucking sunglasses today. That was like $58. We didn't take sunglasses, and I bought a pair for me and a pair for Eloise. It was $58. And you're right though. That promoting side is very tough, and that's why with Rigsby, I really harped on it because I'm very passionate about that because I've watched my parents do it for so long. And these promoters and all these guys, dude, listen, they spend more hours than people would like to understand trying to build these racetracks and these events and all of these things. And listen, it's a thankless job. A lot of them do it just purely because they love it. It's why my dad does it. I can guarantee you, my dad doesn't know anything but racing. It's the only thing he's ever known. It's the only thing he's ever wanted to do. He would give you the shirt off your back tomorrow if he didn't know you. He would come down and help you fix your truck if you were broke down in our parking lot. If your race car was no good, my dad has practiced more race cars after the races at Tri-City, I promise you, than any promoter I know, because a guy came to him and said, Kevin, I don't know if it's me or the race car. Could you hop in and make a couple laps? And he's helped those guys. But, these promoters, they don't make as much money as people, I think, foresee them making, right? They think like, oh, they open the gates and they make $100,000. There's very few events that see six-figure paydays as a promoter all year. And that it means the crown jewels. That means all of that stuff. Yes, I promise you Eldora makes money. I promise you Knoxville, the Nationals makes money. But those are kind of out on their own. They don't count as the rest of the stuff. And that's where I want to stand up. I love to stand up for the promoters because I know what they go through. I know the amount of hours that are pushed into those events, and not even the big events, the weekly events. Listen, whether you have 600 people in the grandstands or 6,000, you still got to pick up trash. You still got to rework the racetrack. You got to clean the bathrooms. You have to order product. You have to order supplies. You have to be ready for the next one. There's so many things that go into that I don't think people realize it. And yes, for sure, it's a business. That's where I think a lot of people get confused when promoters cancel races because it looks like rain now. And they cancel because it's too hot. And they cancel because it's too cold. I can tell you why they do it. And I'm going to be very frank. It's because motherfuckers get on social media and they bitch about it. And they don't want to deal with that. They're pouring their heart and soul into it. Do they want to cancel a race because it's too wet there? I promise you, no promoter wants to cancel a race. They already lost money if they worked all week and it rained out on Friday or Saturday. They're in the hole. So they lose sponsorships because if you don't have that event, that money's not there. They don't get, any of those things. So, when I look at it, it's something I think that does need a more direct look at because I think the promoters are the ones that are getting skinned the most on this deal. I think Michael understands it and is definitely taking a look into it. I know what he helps guys out with. I know when I did my event, he was the first one I called because I said, listen, if I want anybody to help me, it's going to be Michael Rigsby because not only are we great friends, but he's a great business person.
Yep.
And uh, one of the things about Flow Racing or Dirt Vision, either one, listen, they're still running a business. They're not just donating their money.
Right.
And I think people need to realize that. I do think, yeah, sure. Are they making money? Absolutely, they're making money. They should be making money. They bring TV to every household in America if you want to watch it, and you can watch millions of races all year. You can do that, and so they should be making money. They also staff quite a few people to go to these races and film these and do these interviews. So there's a lot of moving pieces and parts to all of this. But I want the promoters to survive. I want all of them to survive. I've said it. I've been very vocal about it on social media that, there's too many tracks closing. There's too many guys that are promoting racetracks that are just not making enough money. And listen, when we've started this podcast, I couldn't tell you how many promoters have either messaged me on Facebook, messaged me on Instagram, or came up to me at a racetrack and just said, man, I appreciate what you're saying on there because you're sticking up for us. And that is kind of sad to think that, because it's like, man, they're on their own island. They're fighting for themselves. They're fighting for their own lives. And we need them. We have to have racetracks no matter what we do. We can't just race Eldora and Knoxville and Fairbury every weekend. Just it can't happen. But I think that has been taken a good look at by the race fans.
Yep.
I feel like you look at a lot of these other racetracks now, they're getting healthier. They are. They definitely are. And that streaming stuff helps because it shows the product they're producing every week, right? You take a place like Marshalltown. 4 years ago, Marshalltown was not on the map. Flow Racing Night in America goes, and Bobby Pierce and Hudson put on the show of a fucking lifetime. And Marshalltown is a star on the map now. They are not a small little dot in the middle of Iowa. They're a star. And that's great. That's what we want. We want all of these racetracks to be that way. We want them all to have that notoriety that, hey, man, like they're all different shapes and sizes. They're different dirt. And you know what? They're all going to screw up one night and it's going to rubber. It's going to dust the fans out. It's not going to be from lack of effort. And that's one thing I can tell you about just about every promoter I've ever met or been, lucky enough to go to their racetrack and watch them. There's very few places I've ever been to that I've been like, man, they just didn't give enough effort. I don't know many of those that I've ever been to because all those guys care. They love what they do. They spend their hard-earned money. Their wives are usually running the front office. Their kids are running around there. Take Ray Marlar. Ray Marlar was one of the greatest guys, and we lost him a few weeks ago, but I got a pleasure of knowing Ray Marlar growing up at Peevely racing every weekend. His grandsons run the tractors at Peevely, and Ray and Sue were just the greatest people. They did not need to be doing what they were doing at their later stages in life, but they loved it so much that they didn't care whether it was too hot or too cold or whatever it was. They were going to give 100% and make the most out of it. And never once did they come down to us and go, hey, this didn't make enough money tonight. We're going to cut this purse. They paid it and they ate it on the sleeve and they went with it. And they probably lost $20,000 or $30,000. That happens more than people think. And I applaud all of them for giving the efforts that they do. I just want them to be healthier at the end of the day.
And I think, again, going back to what you two are doing with the show, I mean, you're bringing that attention to your normal race fan that probably doesn't know that. Like you said, is the keyboard warrior on social media that says, "Oh, I went to the racetrack and it was dusty." I say it in our business all the time. Like a customer says, "Oh, you didn't fix my car today." Let me promise you, when I woke up in the morning, our goal was not to not fix your car. Our goal was to fix your car. Do you think it does me any good by not fixing your car? Like, take the emotion aside for a second. Let's think about it logically. So let me throw that back at you from a standpoint of, do you think the racetrack owner wanted to look in the stands and see people covered with dirt? No, he wants the best racetrack ever. He wants to see guys go door to door for 25 laps, put on a hell of a show because he knows that's what's going to bring people back. Like, it's not in his business's best interest to have a track rubber up or be dusty.
Right.
And that's just, but people don't think that way. They want to just get on there and bash people. And I sometimes have to pull myself away from social media because you just sometimes got to feed, feed
The
into
other thing,
it and
the other
fire
thing
back
too,
at it, to
Dave,
be honest.
and you're absolutely right. The big thing is we want to get people to the racetrack. Okay, I can tell you right now, we can watch it on streaming, whatever. Bottom line is, if when you're in the racetrack, okay, when I'm watching on television, I can't touch Tim McCready.
Yep.
I can't shake his hand and give him a hug and tell him how great he was. I can text him, but we both know the same. The other thing is, let me tell you something what streaming has done for some of the things that I'm going to give Michael Reesby credit. I'm going to tell you right now, Port Royal is a perfect example. Port Royal probably puts on some of the best racing. If you watch Port Royal, the first thing that you say that if you're a sprint car or even a late model fan, when you watch Port Royal, I gotta go.
Yep.
I gotta go. And I think, naturally, Fairbury, I think a lot, I mean, it's certain, but I'm just saying that without it, and we don't see those places like we should be seeing it, but there's nothing like going to the racetrack. I mean, I was that kid when I went. I wanted to see Sammy Swindell in the old Milwaukee Chaparral trailer and the toter pull in at 2:30 in the afternoon. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
I think that's where we miss a little bit. I think that's what's great about I think that's what's great about what sprint car racing does compared to late models. And I think this is where they have an advantage. And I've had this conversation with a bunch of guys. I understand you can't put it on there, it's not for hire and all this, registered RVs. I get it. I understand it. But let me tell you something. When you go to a sprint car fan and you see Donnie Schatz pull in and it's got TSR all over it and his sponsors and everything else, you get jacked up.
Or
And
just
the
how
fans
excited.
love watching those guys when they pull in those haulers. And Gordy, you saw it probably at Volusia first thing. I'll bet you walked out of there going, man, it's pretty amazing watching the way it's impressive.
Well, just at Charlotte, walking up from the pits where all the late models are at to walking to where all the sprint cars are at. I don't want to say it's like a whole nother deal, but it's like a whole nother deal. And I agree with you. I
It
mean,
is another deal.
getting back to the sponsors, I mean, what better way to attract more sponsors, than to, I'll never forget. I was watching, I think one of the Lucas shows one night, and they were making a big deal that Mark Richards put Valvoline on top of the hauler because so much of the aerial shots. I'm like, that's real, and that's where my brain goes from the marketing side. Guys, that's real estate. Like, I sent a message to Rigsby and I sent one to Carter about how many times are we all sitting there watching and enjoy the Outlaw Zen, or they're going to the different, you're in a basically a waiting mode. I'm like, that's commercial, that's airtime. Like, that is where we should be going after these corporate sponsors and saying, listen, I'm getting you X amount of eyeballs. And this is, this is controlled, controlled numbers and controlled, and again, to your point, Don, with the streaming, like, now I'm not just somebody that goes to State Line on Wednesday shows here and watch the World of Outlaws one time and then wonder what happened. Now I'm invested. I'm watching every week. I want to know what my guys are doing. I want to know all of that. So that's the bigger part of it, growing the fan base.
Absolutely.
Now, like right now, we all could be watching Volusia. I think Timmy finished third in the heat, but now I'm watching, and I'm paying attention to what's going on. So I think that's the other part that's growing the sport. And again, you hit the nail on the head, Gordy. They're in business for one thing, and that's to make money. But at the same token, I look at it, you got to share the wealth. And I think they're all doing that because if you don't have something to broadcast, nobody's watching. And,
That's right.
But, I've even gone, Gordy, to different thoughts of, and this is where my brain doesn't shut off at night and Boom makes fun of me. But like, I've even thought, like, with track promoters, do you develop a committee where now all of a sudden your dad's part of it, Bill Catania's part of it, all these racetracks are part of it, and now all of a sudden, and Don owns the chicken finger business. And do we go to him and say, hey, listen, this is what we're going to pay for chicken fingers because now I've got buying power of $10 million with all these racetracks versus, your dad going in and saying, hey, we're going to buy $5,000 worth of chicken fingers for the year. I'm thinking, what can we do as people to come up with ideas like this to continue to help the promoters and build the sport? And it's no different than any other business model. They're all out there. You just got to follow it and scale it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's really where it's at, and I think you're exactly right that, listen, one of the things I think as promoters that my mom and dad have done, and just in the Midwest has been reaching out and trying to build this bond with all these guys together, because you have to work together at the end of the day too to be successful. You can't schedule big races on top of each other and think, there's just, there's plenty of fans, don't get me wrong, but there's still just not enough to go around if you're 40 miles down the road from each other. So those things are ever changing. And I think it's been cool to see some of the new promoters who have stepped in that have taken, I think, that step, that have gone, okay, hey, how do we all gel? How do we all work on this together? How do we make this all work so that we're not stepping on each other's toes at the end of the day, and we're all profitable? And I think that's where that committee, like you're talking about, man, there's never been one time that, going wrong, streaming hasn't been along that long, but that you've had the streamers, series promoters, the racers, and all these people in the same room and go, how the fuck do we do this, right? How do we figure this out where we're all getting the piece that we should get? Should somebody get a bigger piece? Sure, they should. Absolutely. You bring the most to the table, you should get that bigger piece. That doesn't mean this guy down here should be getting the smallest piece just enough to get by when he's the one who's offering you the place to bring the product. Like, there's so much that goes into that. And, it's a wild deal. And there's a lot to be learned. I think, still these numbers are just constantly growing and getting bigger. And you see Flow post what they did the Wild West Shootout and impressions, and what they did at the Chili Bowl in the same week. So I think they're grasping that. I think that's why they're posting it, because they're going, hey, we've realized we know we're big. How do we help everybody now? How do we figure out what gives the most, right? And I think they've done a great job. They built the Lucas series, Flowball High Limit, Dirt Vision owns the Outlaws. They're grasping that. And listen, it's not a knock on them that say they've never helped promoters or done anything. That's not what I'm getting at.
And I'm not saying that at all.
God knows they have. There's just, listen, it's a growth period. And when there's always growing pains, and you figure things out along the way. But I hope that we continue just to learn from each other. Like you said, knowledge is everything at the end of the day. If you want to bring up a fact, or you want to bitch on social media, if you got something behind it, you look a lot smarter to the people than just throwing something wild out there. And that's where it's come to. And we want discussions about racing. It's not like we're saying, hey, don't get on social media and bash or bitch or whatever it may be. But if you got something you want to say, let's make a conversation of it. Don't just go on there and then go in the comment section, and next thing you know, you guys are calling each other names and bringing up shit that has nothing to do with it. Just lay it out there, because in business, tough conversations are real, right? You have to have those. You have to have, sometimes, no matter what you are, maybe your best friend, you're going to argue, you're going to disagree on things. And we want those conversations, because those tough ones are what you grow the most out of. And that's where I want our sport to do that. I want to sit down with all these guys. Hell, I don't have to be in the room. They might not think I'm worth a shit at all, so I don't have to be in the room. But let's at least get the guys who are, that we think are, and get them to sit down and go, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What do we not like about you, and what do you not like about us, and where can we better ourselves? What are the drivers not doing enough? Are the fans not doing enough? Are the promoters not doing enough? I've said it a million times. I don't think the series use the drivers the way they should. I think they should be the autograph sessions. Great. I don't think that's enough. I just don't. I never have. I never will. I think we should be doing meet and greets at our trailer at 3:00. I think they should be able to walk right down and see our race car, and there be a line of 100 people, and they want to see all these things that we have. They want to see what suit company we use, and what helmet we're running, and what safety device we're running, what shock brand, all of these things. That should be put on display. Instead, it's like, hey, go do an autograph session where we're going to kind of push these people through. We want you to hurry up and sign their flag. They can't really stop and talk to you, because we're going to tell them to keep the line moving. That doesn't do anything. I want to hear these people and why they like me or don't like me. I want to hear why they like the next guy sitting next to me more than they like the guy sitting next to him. What is those?
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
Real quick, you look a little like Ryan Delph.
Who?
Does he or does he not look a little like Delph?
Yeah, he probably don't know Ryan Delph.
I don't know, Ryan.
Go look him up when the show's over.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Delph
He
Communication.
does a lot of the guys' websites.
He does my
And,
website. Oh, Ryan
see,
does my website.
he's got a little Ryan in him a little bit. You know,
What,
I
what I
when I
what I
first
use
did it, I was like,
what I usually get is Sean McVay. I get a lot of people who say
I was
I
that.
going
like
to say that.
Sean
I almost
McVay.
said it.
I'm a big
Yeah.
Rams guy, so I'm
Oh,
good
are
with
you?
that.
Yeah,
I like
that's
that.
good. Hey, wait, real quick before we hop off here. I just saw Volusia go green. Before we hop off here, I just was thinking about earlier when you said when you were talking about your car story about the customer coming in. It's not like Bad Boys where they walk in and say, "Good morning, Marcus. Good morning, Mike. Oh, we're gonna fuck up the captain's day today."
Exactly. That's one of my favorite movies, and oh yeah, I know that scene to a T.
I
But
love it. Nah, and man, I want us to do this again because you have such great insight, Dave, on all these things, and obviously being a marketing guy, it there's so much that you bring to the sport already, and it's very noticeable
Absolutely.
because it's listen, you could carry a name, you could sponsor things and do that, but you're not just solely invested in just on money side. You're invested in the sport and those things, and I think that's really it's great to see because you're passionate about it, and we need you guys. We need everybody like you to be passionate about our sport. But I feel like you just bring such a great mindset to it. Just like I said, when we got to talk at Charlotte, some of the things that we talked about for an hour and a half, over like 6 beers or whatever it was. It was awesome because your mind works in a different way than my mind works, and we got to kind of just bounce things off each other. And that's what's special about it is we have so many great minds in our sport these days, and we have a platform now that Don and I have built over these last 8-9 months that we want these conversations to be on social media. We want these conversations to be out there so people can understand what goes through our minds and how to make this sport better and keep growing it the way we're doing it.
well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. And one thing that I really took, and my buddy that was with me there, we both said it is, I feel like that's the lost art in our country now. Like you can't sit down and have a conversation anymore and listen to what the other person has to say because again, you might not agree with it, but share with me why you feel that way and why you think that way. And maybe now all of a sudden I walk away with a different feeling and I'm educated on stuff because again, I don't know what it's like to be a track promoter. I don't know what it's ever been like to sit in a car. I've never even been around the racetrack in a car, so that's why I love picking Boom's mind and I love picking Tim's mind. And, Boom gives me a ton of credit for a lot of the stuff. But like I've said, going back to your part of promoting, drivers doing this and doing that, like, I always try to make sure that like on Tim's page, I tag, World of Outlaws and I tag, go in and tune in at Dirt Vision if you're not going to be there because we all got to promote one another. And like I said to Boom, like, yeah, it's easy to get the attention when Timmy's running well and finishing top 5, but my job would be a lot harder if you're finishing 20th or not making shows every night, So it goes hand in hand, but in the big scheme of things, if the drivers are promoting, listen, at the end of the day, the drivers are the stars of the show. I mean, they're as obviously coming off the Super Bowl yesterday, they're the stars of our sport. So if you don't have the stars, and you guys touched on a couple of weeks about the controversy, with Putty and Bobby and things like that. People love that. They want that in our sport. And then, the second part to that is if we're not all taking care of one another, then there's nothing there. So I think the drivers got to promote it. I think you hit it on a, because I see that at Lernerville. I mean, they run those people through there like cattle when it's autograph session and because obviously they do it and guys got to get down there. They got to
Look
get
like a fucking third base coach out there. Just come on. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen ranchers not get cattle through that fast as people through there. So, but with all that being said, again, I think you hit on it. We got to sit down and have conversations with one another because at the end of the day, I think deep down inside, everybody wants what's best for the sport because they know that's what's going to make it grow.
I think that that the sport will continue to grow. I believe in the sport of both sprint car racing and late model racing, and that it will continue to grow. And naturally, it's a big focus of ours. And because I agree with what Michael Rigsby said, that if I can get these people out to the racetrack and see how great it is, And I always remember when Michael said that on our podcast.
Yep.
If I can get all these people to the racetrack and show them what we have to offer, that's all I need to do. And you said the same thing, Dave. Gotta find a way to get that person. We got to get that youth. Got to get that youth. Richard Marshall once told me that he believes there's just so many things going on. And Gordy will probably be able to kind of attest to this as well, is the fact that he goes, there's so many things going on. There's so many choices. There's more choices we have to do now than we ever had before. So he goes, I think that with our attention spans of the kids today, it's not what it used to be. You took them to the racetrack, they sat in their seat, thought it was the greatest thing in the world. But guess what? Now you got video games, you got everything else going on. So he goes, I think it's important why we try to get these shows like a 2.5 hour window for some of these kids and get them in and out, and they'll appreciate it. If they got to be, because what's the use of running a feature if a kid's going to be asleep in the grandstand?
Correct.
Is he going to want to come back? Is he going to want to come back?
You don't want to run, and neither do the drivers. They don't want to be there till
Does
2.
Dad want to be there? And Gordon, you hit it right on the head too. Just like you talked about how the fact we got to do things earlier. I'll tell you why. Because at the end of the night, Dad's got to go to work the next day. He's got a kid sitting in the grandstand with him, man. When the races are over, the checker flag, he's getting a kid in the car and he's going home. Now he sat in that grandstand at 5 o'clock in the evening and stuff with this kid and getting him the chicken wings and everything else and the hamburgers and stuff, the cotton candy, making his kid happy as it could be to be there because Dad loves it. Yep. And he's trying to make sure that they love it. And the kid wants to be with Dad. Yep. So if you can find a way to get that interaction earlier while the sun's up, I think it is important.
Yeah. And
if you need a driver, I guarantee you take a kid right now and he goes down in that pits and he met Tim McCready today. He's in.
And Don, you said something earlier that I agree, because I remember sitting at Raceway 7 and the guys went out for hot laps, and I literally turned to my buddy Dan and I said, there is nothing like being here live. Them guys flying down the front stretch going into 1 and just hearing that echo off the back, like there's nothing. And going back to when we were in Charlotte, Gordy, I was up in the suite with Brian, and he introduced me to some people, and I don't know the whole thing, but this is where you got to give Brian Carter a lot of credit. So he's working with these people that he brought them over, they're F1, and I probably shouldn't get into too much, but basically all I can say is the way I took it is they're trying to build a racing game that would be live when you guys are out racing. And I'm like, trying to get that youth, involved. I mean, at least that's what I took of what they were trying to do. But like, that's just kind of where my brain goes, to your point, Don. Like, now all of a sudden you meet Tim McCready and now you go home and you're playing a video game and now you're getting to race, with Tim while he's racing live. Obviously the car's not there, but you get that whole. And again, I just think that's a big part of, getting the youth involved and getting them there. Because, again, the sport, once you're there and Gordy, going to your point, you can walk down and meet the driver. I mean, no other sport has that fan interaction. And, and again, watching, like one thing that I think my mom absolutely loves that they do at Eldora, where they pick the young kid to be the young flag guy. I mean, it's just, different things like that just gets kids involved, which is going to make our sport great.
Yep. No, absolutely. And the youth is what drives our sport at the end of the day. No matter what, we have to have youth be passionate about it. And that's the only way it works, is if they're involved and they're thrilled about it, because we have to pass this down to somebody and somebody has to be involved. And I think the social media craze helps us, because the more you can be influenced on there about what's happening here, and you can see how amazing it is, the more younger, guys and girls are going to be involved in it. And that's what's really taken off, I feel like, over the last few years. And the more we can involve them, the more we can involve those young kids who are just dying to meet their hero at the time. If we can do that and spend 5 minutes with them having a conversation, or letting them sit in our race car, or showing them what the hauler looks like, any of those things go so much beyond what we could ever imagine. A lot of us lose touch with that reality, because I know when I was a kid, man, the first thing I want to do when the races were over, I wanted to go pick up parts off the racetrack, and I wanted to get my checkered flag signed by every race car driver that was there.
Yep.
And the one time that I could ever go into the race or go down there and my favorite driver packed up early and left,
Devastating.
crossing them off the list, and you just don't want that. You want those guys, you want them all, right? You want, hey, sit here for an hour, sign these autographs, take the pictures. I know some of them had a shit night and they did things that, things didn't go their way, but man, you got to do those things, and you got to do that as a series. You got to promote these guys and promote them to these fans and show them that they're not just a guy who puts a helmet on. They're a guy that has a family at home, or he has a business, or he does whatever it may be. Personalize these guys to these fans, because that's the way that it grows. That's the way it all is. And I think that's what F1, you happen to bring that up, what F1 does so good. And I know they travel countries and all that.
Right.
But listen, I don't know if there's anything more electric than when a guy wins an F1 race in his home country. You ever seen the parade they throw for that fucking guy, and the people in the stands, and they don't even know him. They know he's from there, and he loves his country, and they're standing right behind him. That part to me is like, we can easily do that. We live in different cities. We don't live in different countries. We race in most of these cities. Like, just put these guys with these people, give them 20 minutes. Hell, I don't know. Maybe every day we need to do an interview with one guy at a racetrack that's 25 minutes that just talks about shit that's not even racing, and maybe cover 5 minutes of racing. But I think that would go a long way. And I think I've harped on it to the Outlaws and Lucas on both of them. When I ran the Outlaws, I'm like, we got to do more. Like, there's more we should be doing. So it's a two-way street. We can always do more without having them. But I think I think most of the guys do a good job.
But like, one thing that, and I hate to give him credit because I'll have to hear about it, but, Devin and I become really good friends, but he does that Facebook Live thing. And I mean, how many people tune in and watch that? And, you know how people think. Now all of a sudden they think they're having a conversation with Devin Moran, and now they think they're really good friends. And obviously Devin's personality fits it great. So, when he's at the racetrack, he talks to everybody, shakes everybody's hands, takes photos. I mean, that's the stuff that the sport needs, 100%. And, I can't agree more with that. And, speaking of memories, like, so I took my daughter, we were at Sharon, it was the first race that she was ever at. And, so at the end of the night, I take her down in the pits. I introduce her to Boom. Boom grabs her by the hand, takes her in the hauler and says, "You got to have a beer with me." Obviously she's at that age that she can do that, but she'll never forget that as long as she lives. She's like, Dad, I got to have a beer with Boom Briggs inside the hauler,
Yeah. Dave, the one year at the Chili Bowl, I got a hold of Timmy. I says, "Give me your Twitter account." And he always trusts me with it. So of course, I'm on my cell phone at the Chili Bowl, and I was doing, so they're asking, he's in the staging area to go onto the track, and they're asking questions about past winners, and I'm twittering from his account going who the winners are. The announcers are going, "Unbelievable. This Tim McCready is sitting in his race car and he's answering all these questions before he goes on the racetrack." Well, anyway, they put one question out, and it was under yellow during the feature, and answered. So, of course, Timmy gets to the pit area and people are going, because he didn't realize, because he's driving, he had no idea. And he gets back and people are going, "Man, I'm really impressed the fact that you're out there racing, and yet you were answering all these questions on social media while you were in the race car." Timmy goes, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." It's like that. And I'm going, and I'm like looking at him, and then he realizes going, "You're like my Twitter account." And I go, "Oh yeah." I go, "Look how many people went up to you and thought how cool it was. The fact that even Corey Cruzman come up to me and says, 'Man, I couldn't believe you knew what years I won the Chili Bowl.'" I mean, and Timmy's like, "I don't know what years you won." "Well, sure you do. You answer questions." He goes, "God had my Twitter account." It was one of the coolest things we did that week of the Chili Bowl, though. It was one of the neatest things, and he'll say it was actually funny and do it. And I think that's important to engage like that. And there was nobody got hurt over it or whatever, but the one time we answered the question while he was actually on the track.
That's awesome.
No, Don, but that's what makes social media, get rid of the negative stuff. That's what makes social media great, is that
Absolutely.
you can feel like you can reach out and touch that Tim McCready, the Bobby Pierce, the, Jonathan Davenports, the Gordy Gundakers, that, you can reach those guys and have a conversation, and again, and obviously Gordy and I've developed a friendship, but when we were, a bunch of guys donated panels and stuff like that for an auction that we did, and I sent a message to Gordy, boom, he shares it right away, and obviously I know he's got a ton of followers, and we were able to raise over $9,000, from that, for a good cause, but. I mean, that's the beauty of social media, right? The interaction that you can have doing something like that, and I think that's a hilarious story. That's awesome. People actually
Yeah.
inside the
Well,
car answering questions.
it's
Gotta have fun with it.
it's the social media stuff is great, and I love getting on there and riling people up and stirring some shit sometimes, and I love replying to people and having fun with them, and I think I hope that they all understand that I intend that a lot of times, even if I am just kind of talking shit back and forth, that I'm doing it just that's who I am. I like to have fun and do that. It's not ill will or whatever it be, but that's what's cool about it is you can send a message to these guys, or you can tweet at them, or you can whatever, and they might respond to it, and you get to have that interaction. And it's cool, and
Yeah,
I know
I
a
was,
lot of the guys enjoy that.
yeah, I
Well, the
was,
other thing, Gordy, too, is you're not hiding behind somebody else's name either.
no,
No,
Okay. When it comes across, it says Gordy Gunn. So it's valid. Okay. Nothing worse than somebody that wants to go off and go on something, wants to hide behind some name nobody knows, whatever. You know what I mean? You want to talk, you want to back it up, hey, put your name out there.
there's a lot of accounts on Twitter um, that I would absolutely love to just roast right now, but I wouldn't want to give them a second of notoriety
Exactly.
because they get on there and hide behind a name and are scared to say something, but they want to spread rumors and facts and all these other shit. Um, and I wouldn't even want to give them a second of time, but
hey,
it's just but the other side of that, you get guys I love, like, I mean, Nick's one of my best friends, but Nick gets on there. He does a great job being on
oh
there,
yeah,
right? And I love going to races, and sometimes I just kind of forget that I should do it. But there's times that I go to races, and man, I'm telling you, I'm wearing that thing out, and I'm having fun doing it. And I think that's cool about it, and that's what's great about us racers. I think there's a lot of that is starting to take place more and more because of that. It's like, man, it's fun to interact with these people and enjoy those moments and let them figure out who we are and how we feel about this situation, good, bad, indifferent, and it lets them realize, like, you know what? Hey, this guy's probably just like me. He likes to go home and have a beer, have a drink. Maybe he
yeah,
just likes to watch TV, or he doesn't watch racing at all, whatever it is when he goes home. But it's cool to have that and go, maybe, you know what? Yeah. Are the guys that race on TV? Yeah. Are we, some of us are superstars. Some of the guys that are superstars. I am not a superstar. I'm going to flat out say that that not me. I'm not calling myself one. So don't anybody fucking get on me about saying that. But we do get more notoriety than the average person does.
sure.
But at the end of the day, we are just like the rest of everybody else. We love our families. We love what we do. We love, all these other things that, yeah, we race car drivers. We put a helmet on. Sure we are, but we're human at the end of the day, and we make mistakes and we say dumb shit. And that's just the truth, and I think it's sad sometimes that guys get put so much on a pedestal that they get harped on for every little step that they make or thing that they say or what they do. But, I know all these guys. Every one of these guys is at the top of our sport. I promise you, I know all of them. And you could go have a beer with every one of them, and you would not think differently about any of them.
Yeah. I was shocked that you weren't wearing your Bad Bunny shirt tonight.
Oh,
I saw your tweet last night.
that one pissed me right off.
Yeah,
That
but
one pissed me off.
to your
Fuck.
point, like the other night, when the whole thing happened with JD and Turbo, and JD parked that car in front of Turbo, like
I
my
was laughing
phone is
so hard I was
blowing
crying.
up, like, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? So I mean, it's shit like that is just, and
Yep.
obviously you take
Awesome.
somebody like JD, and I
Yeah.
mean, that's probably the last person you thought you'd see do it, but
Yep.
I was fucking loving every second of it, but. And again, I think, I tease Steve about this all the time, but, that's one thing, like, boom. I don't think, I said to Steve all the time, I'm like, I don't think you realize how many people love your brother because people relate to him. He smokes cigarettes, he drinks Bush Light, says the F word, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's you're gonna get what
Yep.
there is no filter with Boom. Like I
No,
told
zero.
Boom, I
Oh,
said,
it's gonna be great when we get him on the show.
oh
He's
yeah, I
gonna be
said to
great
him,
when we get him
I
on
said,
the show.
Boom, you should start your own podcast. I said, we'll call it Under the Caution. I said, I'll be the host and I'll just kick it to you and let you talk for 2 hours because it'll be must see entertainment.
It would be.
You
Yeah,
know,
I promise you. That there's I wish that they just ran a live feed of Boom from the minute we got to the racetrack to the minute we
oh,
it's damn it, I would have to watch it every second of the day. I wouldn't even be able to interact with anybody because I just want to see what Boom's doing.
so here I'll share a quick Boom story
We
with.
wanted to get
I'll let
Timmy
you guys go.
when we had Tim on. You know, we tried to see if Boone was around to get him on there for a few minutes, but he was with us. He left us.
So we're in Charlotte. I land before Boom does, and I'll keep names out of this, but obviously we pushed pretty hard to get this race at State Line. And I said, I go to Boom. I said, hey, just so you know, some people are, squawking in the pits because they don't want to go there, da 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 da. And he knew immediately who it was. And I said, listen, I'm just telling you this so you know, keep it between you and I. He wasn't even, I don't even know if he was all the way out the car. And he's in Francis's face and goes, let me fucking tell you about da 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 da. We went to this place and that place is a shithole and I don't want to hear it. And I looked at my buddy and go, so much for keeping that between us. But I mean, that day, if you could have put a microphone on him and had like a GoPro, I mean, I think that would be must see TV.
I'm telling you, it would be.
But at the same token, if somebody breaks down,
Yep.
if somebody needs help,
Oh yeah,
he is the first person there, and that's what makes Boom boom.
Now,
he's been so supportive of our podcast. He'll send a message or a like this all the time with the podcast, and it's been, it means a lot to me when the people that you respect so much in the industry are giving you the thumbs up, and no, that lets us know that we're doing all the right things.
And you guys are, without
And
question.
that's what makes the thing. And Dave, we're coming out a little bit about where are you going on your race? What's your next race trips?
Next
Where are you
race
heading?
trips. Ooh, that's a good question.
Where are we going to see you down the road?
I think I know for sure that we're locked into going to Marion Center and then Bedford.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to try to be at both Eldora races. We've had talks about going out to Wheatland just because of that facility. I heard it's just unbelievable.
It's
I wanted to, if it was up to me, to be honest with you, Don, I would try to get out of here and go every chance I get. But I obviously
I
have
hear
a wife at home and I'm trying to stay married.
I'm
But
saying we're all going
she
through
is
this.
very supportive. But a big part of it for me now is obviously being there, watching Tim, supporting those guys. Obviously, love it when Boom races. I know I'm getting a ton of flack from him for going on this cruise when I should be down at Hendry County and helping him down there. But um, yeah, I don't know exactly. We really haven't ironed our schedule. I know last year my wife made me put it in the calendar so that way she could prepare. But I've got a lot going on here at the dealership, in the power sports store. So, and we've had to cut back on some people. So, I'm wearing a couple more hats. That's why you see me here working as late as I am. And I've been working on it was crazy. I watched the Super Bowl ad last night, and this goes to show you the power of ads. But I've been thinking about developing this app that would help make things smoother, for my power sports store when it comes to doing an inspection on a customer's power sport. And spent about 15 hours on it yesterday with ChatGPT and couldn't get it to work, couldn't get the formulas right, all that type of stuff. All of a sudden, I see an ad on the Super Bowl talking about this new thing that builds an app in 5 minutes, and literally it built this app in 5 minutes. So it's crazy to see what the technology is out there. And again, going back to the guys, it's not hard. If you struggle with what to say or how to say it or how to promote yourself, I mean, the technology is there to help you, even if you're not that great with words. I mean, a lot of stuff I do with Timmy stuff is like, hey, say this, say that, boom, it spits it out in 2 seconds, copy, paste, and you're on your way. So, these guys could really, really build it. And I've even said to Tim, like what sets like the guys like JD apart and Devin and even Ricky does a really good job with it is being that close to the fans and giving them what they want. And, I think they've all done pretty well building a pretty good, following and fortune for themselves. And, I think a lot of it has to do with being personable and being out there, whether you like those guys or not. I learned a long time ago in advertising, whether if they're talking about you good or they're talking about you bad, they're still talking about you. So
That's right. That's
100%.
right. That's right. That's what our buddy Bloomquist, that's exactly the way Scott always looked at it. You know what I mean? I only still remember one thing about Scott. And it's funny, and Gordy, you'll love this because I talked to him and he was going to Huron, South Dakota at the State Fair. The Outlaws had a show there and he had to go, right? And Scott says, listen, and I'll never forget it. It was at Tri City. There was a Tri City like the week before they went up there. And Scott looked at me and Eckert and told me, Eckert, he said, listen, we don't need to be going no place where they don't know who I am. He goes, and I'm telling you right now, when we get up to Huron, South Dakota, I'm not going to be happy because I'll guarantee you they don't know who the hell I am. Like that. And if they don't know who I am, we don't need to be going there. Like that. And it was, well, the funniest thing about it, the place was like sold out. They had a massive crowd, and Scott and Eckert calls me up and says, why don't you ask Scott how many t-shirts he sold that night? See if he still feels the same. So I, of course, busted his chops. I was like, Scott, I go, that place they said, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Some of the nicest people in the world up there.
my favorite Bloomquist story is I was a young kid. We were at the Pittsburgher, and this is where
Oh, yeah.
I really realized who Scott was. I think they were 10 laps into the feature. He stops in the front stretch, gets the caution to come out, goes in, changes all four tires, and went to the outside and lapped the field. I've never seen somebody go from the rear to the front like that in my life. And I'm just like, that's when I became a Bloomquist fan, and the fact that like that unbelievable talent to do that.
That was that 90, 91, somewhere in there.
I think so.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
What I remember, yeah.
Just unbelievable.
Our show, Dave, a lot of the show is we Gordy and I, we dedicate pretty much our show to Scott. He means we lost Gordy, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
He means a lot to me. He always will. I tease people all the time that I don't believe in the spirits and the ghosts and all that, the aliens. Everybody knows how I am. No one knows I don't, but I can tell you since he's been gone, some crazy shit has happened.
Yeah.
And I swear there are times when I know he's with me, and I can't explain it, but it just I don't know. But I know one thing: he would be very proud of what we're doing. I know his mom is tickled to death what we're doing because she even says to me all the time, she's like, "You guys do the best job of keeping his spirit alive," and I go, "Oh, we always will," because he's the fiber of a lot of what motorsports is, of what he built, the mystique. He was our Ric Flair,
Yep.
and you can't, you just can't. He just means so much, and a lot of the things that these guys, the money they race for today, and a lot in the merchandising, the way, a lot of it they learned from him.
Yep.
He was a way ahead of his time. And
I,
and what's crazy about it is like how genius of a person he was with the race cars. That I mean, look at look at Dale McDowell. I mean, he's one of the last ones to still be in a Bloomquist car. And you look at it and it's still very competitive, and it's just goes to show you how far ahead of his time he was at
oh,
one time, you know.
and to see, I was there when they did the whole tribute to him at Eldora, and just to see the people that showed up, again, to your point, whether you liked him or you didn't like him, you respected him and you respected what he did for the sport. And it's and still to this day, like every racetrack I go to, it's overwhelming how many Bloomquist shirts you still see, you know,
Yep.
in the stands. And I think that is, to your point, I feel like he was the Earnhardt of our
Yes.
sport. You know what I mean?
It was Earnhardt. Mhm.
And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, even, you listen to, Hoffman and JD and all those guys talk about what they've learned and what they've done. And listen, sometimes, I say it to all my people, like, some of the best ideas aren't made, they're stolen. And, those guys have fallen to everything that he's done, but why wouldn't you? I say it in the
Exactly.
industry all the time, the number one brand that most manufacturers, Toyota is, they've got their stuff together from an aspect of an automobile dealership. And I don't understand why these other manufacturers don't follow them. Like, you know, they're the number one car. I mean, why try to reinvent the wheel? Sometimes you
Right.
just gotta follow it and maybe
It's
try to.
kind of like Southwest, right?
Yeah.
The Southwest model. You know what I mean? It's like everybody else, you hear all the airlines struggling, you're going, but yet Southwest seems to be ahead of everybody. I mean, why not just do what they're doing? You know what I mean? But no, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show with
Oh
us.
no, I appreciate
No,
it. I
really
told
appreciate
Gordy
it.
anytime that you guys need me, I love what you guys are both doing. And it's again, I think you both need to understand how much you're educating the typical normal average race fan. And I don't mean that to be
Thank you.
a, you know,
Yeah.
demeaning anybody, but like it's just like anything else. I mean, going back to education is everything. The more they learn about the sport, the more they're going to want it. It's like a drug. The more you want it, and so yeah, it's awesome. I tune in every Friday. I
Man,
usually
that's
have it on in
awesome.
the
That's
background,
great.
in the
We
background while I'm
try
working.
to get, we try to mix it up a little bit with sprint
Yep.
cars and the late model. Depends on what's kind of going on. We felt like, you know, uh, the Baston thing, it was really special to me because um, I couldn't stand when people were bashing a guy and basically didn't even give him a chance. Uh, I mean, everybody had it out for him, it seemed like. And the guy hadn't even done anything wrong. He's one of the nicest kids.
Yep.
And when he said on our show, and I still remember when he says, I'm just looking for a home and looking for an opportunity because I know my abilities. And when he came out of the gate one last week, dude, I mean, Gordy and I were texting each other back, and we felt like a part of it because we've been backing him up so much, right? I mean, it's like because we do it with anybody. It wasn't just him. It would have been anybody that would have been in that situation. It's just not. That it gets back to the social media, like we talked about, Dave, the negative, all the people out there, and that's why I mean that's why it that's the sort of things that do bother me.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody will ask me all the time, going, "What bothers you? What really bothers you?" And I'm like, the lack of support sometimes, or just a lack of respect for, and the guys have done nothing wrong, and yet just have been destroyed just before they even get an opportunity, and that just bothers me.
or like I haven't met Donnie yet, but Boom speaks the world of Donnie, and
Mhm.
just even the same situation with him. I mean, to be at the top of the peak and put sprint car racing on the map that it is, and you know it's not like the guy forgot how to drive a race car, you
No.
and it's just so I've become a sprint car fan because I was always just a late model fan, but I've become a sprint car fan just because of Donnie, and I want to see Donnie go out and
You
again
all?
because of the relationship with Boom, but going back to that relationship thing, right? Like I want to go out and see him just kick people's ass and say, hey, you know what? I'm still saying here.
Yeah.
That's part of what makes the fun with Timmy too. Like everybody wrote Timmy off, and I'm
Yep.
still top five driver in the country as far as my opinion, and has nothing to do with my name being on the front of the car. I mean, some of the races that he won last year and again, I don't, we can get into this, but this as well as when that track slows down and it becomes a driver's race instead of just hammer down and run the cushion, I'll put Timmy up there with anybody in the country to win that race. So, watching him come from 10th, that night at Volusia to, when they were out in South Dakota, and I think he started 12th or 14th that night and come and won that race. Like, and for me, that's what I want to watch. I don't want to watch somebody just hammer around the cushion and win the race.
Yeah. I hear her. He's so methodical.
Hey, sorry,
That's
boys.
what
Phone died.
that's what
It's
we were talking about Timmy a little bit, talking about how Dave was talking about how Timmy's style is, and just like me and Gordy have always said that he's so methodical in everything that he does out there, and he's a thinking race car driver. I remember I'm watching it flow last year, and Gordy didn't make the race at it was Canton. And I would have given anything. I almost called these clowns. Actually, they both didn't make the race at Canton. And there's a video of they're showing these two guys are talking and they're laughing, giggling. I wanted to almost pick up the phone and say, "Listen here, you dudes. I know you didn't make the race, but I want to know what you guys are talking about because your conversation that was going on was better than anything that was going on the racetrack." I can tell you.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
Gordy knows what I'm talking about that night. You know, it's over there. Those two. Just nothing was going there right. Nothing was going right for either one of them that night. Nothing just was going right.
Hey, I'll tell you what. Actually, it's funny because that night I remember pretty good. We actually, as soon as the races were over, actually I was over in Timmy's trailer and we were kind of dissecting what we both did wrong and what we were both trying and kind of going through different things. And then we actually we talked about for like 10 minutes and then we left there. JD was with us and we drove to a casino. I think Hoffman was with us too. We drove to a casino and we all got out there and we never talked a lick of fucking racing the rest of the night. And and then JD ends up winning Saturday there at Fairbury and it just whatnot. But it just goes to show that the sport gives you ups and downs and lumps, but you take all these in with you. And like I said, I've been very fortunate to be really good buddies with both Timmy, with JD, and these guys, and they're true professionals, and you learn a lot from them. And sometimes it's just not your night, and you have to learn that, and you have to build on it. And when it is your night, you better take full advantage of it because you don't know when you get the next one. So it is, like I said, it is funny. There's sometimes some of those moments that are captured by photographers or people that are videoing that and they see that and you don't really know what it is except only what we're saying. You laugh at those because it's like, man, if people knew what we were saying, they would.
I know.
Some feelings would probably be hurt. Or whatever it may be, but it's just it's the joy of our sport, and that's what I love about it, and I'm just thankful to share with it. Guys like you, both of you for sure, and everybody that is a part of it. We get to do a lot of really cool things. Get to win some nights, get to run like shit some nights. You get to do all these things, and it's just a full circle style deal.
So, real quick before we go, Brandon Overton won tonight, guys. Boy, he's on fire right now.
That's what, 4 nights in a row?
Yeah. What do you think about that, Gord?
I think go look at the Dirt Parlor picks that I had. Look who I had. Both of them.
I had both of them too.
I did too. Yeah. So, hey boys, I'm gonna have to jump off here.
All right. Well, let's close her down, Gord. You want to sign us off with Dave, or Dave can maybe sign us off.
Yeah, I just want to thank you both for having me on. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and like I said to you guys, Don, hopefully we get to meet in person here sooner than later at the racetrack, and then I'm here whenever you guys need me. Love to hop on and talk more, and
yep.
Awesome.
You got some ideas to make us explode even more than what we
boys, I'm hopping off here, so I love you. Thank you, Dave, for coming on here.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Well, I'm going to thank our sponsors, and I want to make sure that, first of all, in closing, I want to thank Dave Warren for coming on with us tonight. It was very informational for all the fans at home. When you see this podcast at the end of the week, I think you're really going to enjoy. You're going to get a true perspective of not only a guy that's very invested into the sport, but also, more than anything, a fan of the sport. And is looking, and the Dirt Parlor can't say enough and how happy we are to have him on here tonight. And I want to thank all of our partners for making this happen. So thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Talk soon.
All right. Call me anytime.
Okay, buddy. You too.
All right. See you.